My own daughter and her husband left me for dead after a staged car crash, all to steal my life's work. My name is David, I'm 58 years old, and for 30 of those years, I've been a man obsessed. I poured every spare dollar, every waking thought, and every ounce of my soul not just into raising my only child, Jessica, but into an invention I believed would fundamentally reshape our world. I just never imagined that the future I was building for her, she would try to kill me to possess. It all began on a rainy Tuesday in November, a night that was supposed to represent the culmination of my entire existence. The air in the Gilded Vine, one of those downtown restaurants where the waiters whisper the specials, was thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet victory. Across the table, Jessica raised her champagne flute. The diamonds on her engagement ring, a gaudy rock her husband Mark had bought her, caught the dim, ambient light and fractured it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. A toast, she declared, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. To my father. The genius who spent more time with circuit boards than with me, but hey, it's finally about to pay off. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mark, sitting beside her, draped a possessive arm around her shoulders. His smile was all teeth, a polished veneer that never seemed genuine, like a billboard advertising a product he didn't believe in. "We're so incredibly proud of you, David." "Truly," he said, his tone oozing a practiced sincerity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. All those years locked away in that dusty old garage, all the missed holidays and birthdays. It was all worth it in the end. A multi-billion-dollar licensing deal. Who would have thought? He wasn't wrong about the garage. For 2 decades, it had been my sanctuary and my self-imposed prison. After my wife, Eleanor, passed away, it became the only place where the grief didn't feel all-consuming. While other men my age were obsessing over their 401(k)s or planning golf trips, I was running quantum simulations, meticulously soldering microcircuitry under a magnifying lamp, and surviving on a relentless diet of black coffee, stale crackers, and stubborn, irrational hope. The result of that obsession was the Aura Core. It wasn't just a better battery, it was a paradigm shift. A small, stable, self-regenerating power source based on principles of quantum entanglement that even I barely understood. It could power an electric car for 1,000 miles on a single 10-minute charge. It could power a home for a month. It was my life's work, my symphony, and I had just finalized a licensing deal with a global auto manufacturing giant that would, as Mark so crudely put it, make me a billionaire overnight. The final patent documents, the legal keys to this new kingdom, were nestled safely in my worn leather briefcase on the chair beside me. I looked at Jessica, her face a heartbreaking echo of her mother's. "It wasn't for me, honey," I said softly, my voice thick with an emotion I rarely showed. "All of this, it was always for you. To give you the security, the freedom, the life I never had. So you'd never have to worry about a single thing." She teared up, a single perfect tear tracing a path down her cheek. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Dad. I know. I love you." The words felt like a gut punch of validation, the absolution I'd been seeking for years of perceived parental neglect. The drive home was quiet, a stark contrast to the forced cheer of the restaurant. The city lights of Seattle blurred into long, impressionistic streaks against the rain-slicked windows of Mark's luxury sedan. I was in the back seat, my briefcase clutched tightly on my lap like a holy relic. A profound sense of peace washed over me, the kind that only comes at the end of a long, arduous journey. The deal was done. My daughter was set for life. I had fulfilled my promise to Eleanor. I could finally rest. That's when the world dissolved into chaos. It started with the blinding glare of headlights in the rearview mirror, followed by the deafening screech of tires that wasn't ours. The impact was a physical, bone-shattering explosion of force. It threw me forward, my head smashing against the hard plastic of the front seat's headrest with a sickening crack. The world became a violent, disorienting kaleidoscope of spinning metal, shattering glass, and the horrifying, metallic groan of a car being torn apart. The last thing I remember before the blackness swallowed me whole was a searing, white-hot pain shooting through my left side, and the sound of Mark's voice, cutting through the ringing in my ears with chilling clarity. It wasn't a voice of panic or concern. It was a voice of cold, calculated purpose. "Jess, get the briefcase. Forget him, get the damn briefcase. Now." Before we continue with the story of how I clawed my way back from the abyss to orchestrate a revenge so total it would become a legend, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. And let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your support means the world. I woke up to the steady metronomic beeping of a heart monitor, each pulse a dull, painful reminder that I was still alive. The air was thick with the sterile, chemical smell of a hospital, a scent that immediately filled me with a sense of dread. A dull, throbbing ache radiated from my head, a relentless drumbeat of pain, and a sharper, more intimate agony shot through my ribs with every shallow breath. A nurse with weary but kind eyes was checking my foredrip. She noticed my eyelids flutter open. "Welcome back, Mr. Miller," she said softly. "You've been in a pretty bad accident. You gave us all quite a scare. You've been in a medically induced coma for 3 days." 3 days. The words felt alien. I tried to speak, to ask what happened, but my throat was raw, as if I'd swallowed broken glass. I managed a weak, rasping sound. The nurse patted my arm gently. "Sure, don't try to talk. You had a pretty serious concussion, a few broken ribs, and some internal bleeding. But you're a fighter." A good Samaritan called 911 from a burner phone, said there was a hit and run, and then disappeared. "You're very lucky." Lucky. The word echoed in the fog of my mind. A few minutes later, Jessica and Mark rushed in, their faces carefully arranged into masks of profound relief and concern. Jessica's eyes were red-rimmed, and Mark had a day's worth of stubble, a calculated touch to make him look worried and sleepless. "Dad? Oh my God, Dad, you're awake." Jessica's voice was a soft, trembling whisper. She rushed to my bedside and grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I looked from her face to Mark's, and that sliver of memory from the crash pierced through the fog. Asterisk, forget him, get the damn briefcase. Asterisk, it couldn't be real. I had to be mistaken. Delirious from the pain medication. My daughter, my sweet Jessica, she couldn't. The mind is a fragile thing after trauma, I told myself. It plays tricks. I decided in that split second to play along with the fog. I let my eyes drift around the room, unfocused. I feigned confusion, a deep and unsettling disorientation. Mark leaned in, his voice low and soothing. "David," the doctor said, "they said you have some significant memory loss. Retrograde amnesia. It's from the head trauma. You might be confused for a while. You might not remember the last few weeks, or even months." Amnesia. The word was a gift. A perfect, impenetrable shield. I looked at them, my expression one of utter bewilderment. I mumbled questions. Where am I? Who are you?" Their performance was Oscar-worthy. Jessica began to cry, real tears this time, but I suspected they were tears of relief, not grief. She held my hand to her cheek. "I'm Jessica, Dad. Your daughter. I love you so much." Mark put a comforting hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to convey support but felt heavy, possessive. "Don't worry, David," he said. "We're here. We'll take care of everything. You just focus on getting better." They thought they were managing a brain-damaged invalid. They had no idea they were speaking to a judge and jury. That night was the first night of my new life. Believing I was heavily sedated and lost in a world of fractured memories, they let their guard down. They stood in the far corner of my dimly lit room, their voices low, conspiratorial whispers that sliced through the quiet space and landed in my ears like shards of ice. "His memory is completely shot," Mark said, a note of undisguised triumph in his voice. "I spoke with Dr. Evans. He confirmed it. The trauma from the crash wiped the last few weeks clean. He has no idea about the deal, the patent. Nothing. He thinks it's still 2021. Are you sure?" Jessica whispered back, her voice trembling, but not with sorrow. It was the tremor of fear, of greed, of a high-stakes gamble. What if he remembers? He won't. And even if he does, who's going to believe him? He's officially brain-damaged. Mark chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "We have the briefcase. We have the final schematics. I've already spoken to our lawyer. We're filing the patent under our names tomorrow morning. We'll say it was a joint project you were leading, that his role was advisory. He's in no position to contest it. The corporation thinks the sole patent holder is incapacitated, maybe dead. The deal is on hold. Once we secure the patent as ours, we renegotiate. We'll get everything, Jess. Everything he slaved away for. It's what we deserve. We're young. We can actually use that kind of money. What was he going to do? Sit on it until he died? My blood didn't run cold. It froze solid in my veins. I lay perfectly still, my eyes closed, my breathing measured and even, a statue carved from rage. Every word they spoke was a hammer blow, shattering the stained glass image I had held of my daughter, revealing the monster she had become. But what about him? Jessica's voice was a faint whisper. I heard Mark sigh, a sound of weary impatience. We'll take care of him. We have to. It looks good. We'll be the devoted children caring for their tragically injured father. It completes the story. He's our pass to a life of unimaginable wealth, Jess. He's the price of admission. That was it. That was the moment the loving, naive father named David Miller died in that sterile hospital bed. In his place, something new was born. Something cold, patient, and utterly methodical. They thought they had left me for dead on the side of a road. They were wrong. They had just armed their own executioner. I was going to let them build their entire world on my stolen dreams, let them climb to the very pinnacle of success, just so I could have the profound pleasure of watching it all burn down around them. They had the briefcase, but I had the real key. The schematics they held were 99% complete. But that last 1%, the one I had kept only in my head, it wasn't just a secret ingredient. It was a secret, self-destruct sequence. A fatal flaw. A kill switch. Their kingdom would be built on a foundation of sand, and I would be the god who commanded the tide to come in. For the next 18 months, I became a phantom in my own life, a ghost haunting the opulent halls of my stolen legacy. They moved me from the sterile confines of the hospital into the guest wing of their new mansion in the hills overlooking Seattle. It was a monstrosity of stark white marble, floor-to-ceiling glass and cold, minimalist furniture. A house that screamed of new money and felt more like a modern art museum than a home. It was cold, impersonal, and echoed with the profound emptiness of their character. Every morning, I would wake up in a bed with a thread count higher than my old bank balance, look out at a perfectly manicured lawn that a team of gardeners tended to with silent precision, and feel the crushing, soul-deep irony. This palace, built on the foundations of my life's work, had become my gilded cage, and I, its most prized, pathetic exhibit. My old garage, with its honest, comforting smell of solder, old wood, and ozone, felt like a distant, half-forgotten dream. I played the part of the frail, brain-damaged father with a method actor's unwavering dedication. It was, without question, the most important and difficult role of my life. My movements were deliberately slow, my hands feigning a slight tremor that I had practiced for hours in front of a mirror. My gaze was distant, unfocused, as if I were perpetually trying to grasp a thought that was just out of reach, a ship lost in the fog of my own mind. I would forget things constantly: the day of the week, Mark's name, how to operate the ridiculously complicated German coffee machine that hissed and whirred like a temperamental spaceship. Each time, Jessica would sigh, a carefully calibrated sound that blended theatrical pity with a sharp edge of genuine annoyance. "No, Dad, this button. The one with the little picture of a cup. See?" she'd say, guiding my hand as if I were a toddler. Then she would pat my hand, her touch feeling like a spider crawling on my skin, and I would have to fight every instinct in my body that screamed to recoil. They treated me with a cloying, patronizing sweetness that was a constant, low-grade torture. They spoke to me in slow, simple, sing-song sentences. "Time for your medicine, Dad," Jessica would coo twice a day, handing me a small white pill and a glass of water. The pill was nothing more than a sugar placebo, prescribed by a doctor on Mark's payroll to maintain the elaborate illusion of my cognitive decline. They thought they were managing a problem, a piece of inconvenient but necessary baggage. They had absolutely no idea they were nurturing a viper in their own home, allowing it to grow stronger and more venomous with each passing day. Their social and professional lives exploded. With my stolen patent as their launchpad, they created aura power, and the media, always hungry for a compelling story, devoured it whole. They were the brilliant, young power couple who had seemingly solved the greatest challenge of the Green Revolution overnight. They were visionaries. They were heroes. They threw lavish parties where champagne flowed like water and the air buzzed with self-congratulation and the hollow laughter of the city's elite. During these events, I was their star exhibit, their living, breathing sob story, a tool to garner sympathy and add a layer of tragic depth to their otherwise perfect narrative. Mark would wheel me into the crowded living room, the incessant chatter momentarily dimming as all eyes turned to the pathetic old man in the wheelchair. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Jessica's remarkable father, David," he'd announce, his arm draped casually around the back of my wheelchair. He was the original inspiration for so much of this. We almost lost him in the terrible accident that nearly claimed us all. His mind isn't what it used to be, bless his heart, but we're so incredibly blessed to still have him with us. A wave of sympathetic murmurs would ripple through the crowd of venture capitalists with predatory smiles and journalists hungry for a soundbite. They'd look at me with a sickening mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I'd offer a weak, vacant smile and a slight, confused nod, my eyes carefully blank. I was a prop, and I played my part to perfection. I once overheard a powerful investor say to Mark, with a conspiratorial clap on the back, "Tragic, what happened to him? But in a way, it's poetic, isn't it? The old guard making way for the new generation." Mark had laughed, a hearty, soulless sound that echoed in my memory for days. That night, I sat in the darkness of my room, the mask of the invalid finally off, and let the pure, unadulterated hatred burn away any last flicker of paternal love. There was no longer a father here. There was only an architect of ruin. While they basked in the blinding spotlight of their fraudulent success, I worked relentlessly in the shadows. My days were spent in supposed quiet contemplation, staring out the window or blankly watching television. But behind the vacant expression, my mind was a fortress of activity, a whirlwind of calculations, plans, and contingency strategies. My nights were my own. When the mansion finally fell silent and I was sure they were asleep, I'd slip out of bed. My burner phone, a cheap, untraceable device I'd had a loyal friend purchase for me with cash months before, was my lifeline to the outside world. It was my sword and my shield. Tucked away in the darkness of my room, the pale blue light of the screen illuminating my face, I reconnected with the one person on earth I knew I could trust implicitly, my old lab assistant Leo. Leo was a brilliant kid, a Caltech PhD dropout who saw the sublime beauty in quantum physics the way a poet sees it in a sunset. He was fiercely loyal, and he knew my work almost as well as I did. My first message to him, sent over a heavily encrypted messaging app, was simple and stark. "They stole it, Leo. All of it." His reply came back in seconds, a beacon in the darkness. "I knew it, David. I've been following the news. The modifications they filed in the patent addendum, they're just superficial cosmetic changes, legal smokescreens. They don't understand the core principles. They're like children playing with a fusion reactor. And they definitely don't understand the resonance cascade." The resonance cascade. Just seeing the words typed on the screen sent a shiver of cold, electric satisfaction down my spine. It was my masterpiece of self-destruction, a secret I had woven into the very fabric of the aura core. It was a microscopic, self-replicating crystalline flaw I had introduced into the battery's lattice structure. Under normal conditions, it was completely dormant, undetectable by any standard diagnostic. But I had designed it with a hidden timer, triggered not by time, but by thermodynamics. After approximately 550 charge and discharge cycles, which equated to about 18 months of average consumer or industrial use, the flaw would begin to vibrate at a specific harmonic frequency. This resonance would then spread exponentially throughout the crystalline structure, causing a rapid, catastrophic, and most importantly, permanent failure of the battery's ability to hold a charge. They wouldn't explode or catch fire. That would be too messy, too obvious, and might even be fixable with a recall. No, my design was far more elegant, far more insidious. They would simply die. All of them. All around the world, in cars, in laptops, in medical devices. A silent, digital plague of my own design. "I need you to set up a shell corporation for me, Leo," I typed, my thumbs moving with a newfound sense of purpose and urgency. "Phoenix Dynamics. Completely untraceable back to me. And I need you to start quietly acquiring Aura Power's manufacturing and distribution data. Every production run, every batch number, every shipping manifest. I want a map of my stolen legacy, I want to know where every single one of my ticking time bombs is. For a full year, I lived my punishing double life. By day, I was the broken father, a sad, shuffling relic of a man. By night, I was the strategist, the ghost in the machine, the puppet master pulling invisible strings from my luxurious prison. I listened to their phone calls from the hallway, pretending to be lost and confused on my way to the kitchen for a glass of water. I saw the emails they carelessly left open on their laptops, detailing massive new contracts and global expansion plans. I learned their business from the inside out, memorizing the names of their key partners, their biggest clients, their most ambitious projects. Their arrogance was their greatest vulnerability. They believed they were untouchable gods of a new age. 6 months into my quiet war, they landed the Apex Motors contract, a $10 billion deal to put Aura power batteries into an entire new line of luxury electric sedans. Their stock price doubled overnight. At the 1-year mark, their IPO shattered Wall Street expectations, making them paper billionaires. Jessica and Mark were everywhere, on the cover of Forbes, Wired, Time. The Forbes cover was the final gut-wrenching insult that solidified my resolve into something harder than diamond. It was a close-up of Jessica, her expression serene and confident, her eyes full of a wisdom she'd never earned. The headline, "The Future is Female, Jessica Evans and the Battery That Changed Everything." They had even started calling it the Evans-Thorne patent in their press materials. They hadn't just stolen my work, they were systematically, methodically, erasing my name from existence. Each new success was another floor added to their glittering glass tower, and I watched with a grim, detached satisfaction, knowing that I was the one who had mined the foundations with dynamite. 18 months. The date was circled in my mind. Every time I saw a news report of another major company proudly announcing their switch to Aura power, I felt a jolt of dark, malevolent electricity. They were all just joining the death row I had so carefully constructed. Then, 16 months into my quiet war, I had a moment of profound weakness. I was in the library, a vast 2-story room they never used, dusting books, one of my assigned therapeutic chores. I came across an old family photo album I hadn't seen in years. I opened it to a random page. It was a picture of Jessica, age 7, grinning a gap-toothed smile at the camera, holding up a crude crayon drawing of a rocket ship she'd made for me. For a fleeting, agonizing second, the father in me screamed, a voice of pure, unadulterated grief from a life I no longer had. Asterisk, this is your little girl. You're Jessie. The one you taught to ride a bike. How can you do this to her? Asterisk, but then, the memory of her voice from the hospital room, cold and sharp, cut through the sentimental fog like a surgeon's blade. Asterisk, he's a confused old man with brain damage. Asterisk, the father died all over again, and the ghost in the machine, the cold architect of ruin, took over. I closed the album with a soft, final click and put it back on the shelf. There was no turning back. The countdown hit 0 on a Tuesday. The 18th month. I was sitting in my usual armchair in the corner of the vast living room, pretending to watch a mindless game show, when I saw the first sign on my burner phone. It was a small post, buried deep in a niche German automotive forum. The title, translated, read, "My new Apex Voltex is a brick. Help." The post described in frantic detail how the user's brand new, top-of-the-line electric sedan, powered by a state-of-the-art Aura core, had gone completely dead overnight. The dashboard was dark. It wouldn't charge. It was a $120,000 paperweight. It had begun. Over the next 48 hours, the trickle became a stream. A panicked post from a tech blogger in Japan whose entire suite of Aura-powered gadgets had died simultaneously. A dozen users in a California Tesla forum who had retrofitted their cars with aftermarket Aura power packs, all reporting the same sudden, catastrophic failure. Then the stream became a raging river. A whole fleet of delivery drones for a logistics company in Texas dropped out of the sky like stones. A massive shipment of high-end laptops destined for a corporate client in New York arrived with every single battery completely dead. I was in the living room when the real storm finally hit their shores. Mark burst in, his face pale and slick with sweat, his usually perfect hair disheveled. His phone was pressed so hard to his ear I was surprised the screen didn't crack. "What do you mean a whole shipment is dead on arrival? That's statistically impossible. Test them again. Test them all." Jessica was right behind him, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold her tablet. "Mark, forget the shipment. Look at this." She held it out to him. It was a live feed from a major international tech news channel. The glaring red banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Aura power outage? Global reports of sudden battery failure plague tech darling." Their faces were a perfect symphony of dawning horror. The resonance cascade was no longer a secret. It was a global headline. They scrambled, calling their chief engineers, their heads of manufacturing, screaming questions that had no answers. They ran every diagnostic imaginable, tore batteries apart in their multi-million-dollar labs, but found nothing. The flaw was a ghost in the machine, a secret written in the very physics of the device. It was my signature, my final brutal message to them, and only I possessed the key. Over the next week, their world came crashing down. The river of failures became a biblical tidal wave. Thousands, then tens of thousands of devices, from family cars to critical life support systems in hospitals, were failing. Aura Power's stock didn't just fall, it evaporated. It was a vertical, 90-degree drop from which there was no recovery. Their investors, the same powerful men who had clapped Mark on the back at their parties, were now screaming for his head on a pike. Class action lawsuits were being filed by the hour. Their billion-dollar empire was now a multi-billion-dollar liability. They held an emergency press conference. I watched it on their 85-inch, crystal-clear living room TV, a small, cold, satisfied smile playing on my lips for the first time in a year and a half. Jessica stood at the podium, her expensive makeup unable to hide the raw terror in her eyes, her voice cracking as she promised they were working around the clock to find a solution. Mark stood behind her, motionless, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fear. He looked like a man watching his own public execution, and in a way he was. That was my cue. While the world watched them implode, I went to my room and packed the small overnight bag I had prepared weeks ago. I walked calmly through the grand foyer, past the soulless sculptures and expensive paintings that meant nothing. I didn't look back. I walked out the heavy front door into the clean, crisp air of freedom. A nondescript black sedan was waiting for me at the curb. Leo was behind the wheel. He simply nodded, his eyes grim but resolute. "It's time, David," he said. "Yes, Leo," I replied, getting into the car and shutting the door with a satisfyingly solid thud. "It's time." I left my life as a ghost behind. The next time my daughter and her husband saw me, it wouldn't be as the frail, confused old man they kept as a pet. It would be as the man who held the fate of their entire world, and the cure for the plague he had unleashed, in the palm of his hand. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. Phase 2, the final crushing blow, was about to begin. Aura Power's headquarters was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, a monument to their stolen success. Now, it was a war room under siege. I walked into the lobby, not as the shuffling, confused old man they knew, but as David Miller, inventor. I wore a tailored suit, my posture was straight, and my eyes were clear and sharp. The receptionist, who had only ever seen me as a pathetic charity case, stared in disbelief. "I'm here to see Jessica Evans and Mark Thorne," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Tell them the original architect of the Aura Core is here to talk about the resonance cascade." I was escorted to their top-floor conference room. The panoramic view of the city was wasted on them. They were huddled with a team of panicked engineers, surrounded by whiteboards covered in useless equations. When I walked in, the room fell silent. Jessica's jaw dropped. Mark looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Dad," Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's not my name," I said, walking to the head of the table. "Not anymore. You can call me Mr. Miller." I placed a single data chip on the polished surface of the table. Everything you need to know is on there. The original patent files, time-stamped from 2 years ago. My lab notes, detailing the intentional, subatomic flaw. And for good measure, an audio recording from my hospital room, where you both detailed your plan to steal my life's work and leave me to rot. Mark lunged for the chip, but I was faster. I picked it up and held it between my thumb and forefinger. This one's just a copy. The originals have already been delivered to the SEC, the U.S. Patent Office, and the lead counsel for the class action lawsuit that's about to bankrupt you. Jessica sank into a chair, her face ashen. You knew all along. You were faking it." I had a front row seat to your grand performance, I said, my voice dripping with ice. I watched you build your house of cards, knowing that I was the one who decided when the wind would blow. You can fix it, Mark blurted out, his voice desperate. The flaw. You can stop it. We'll give you anything. Money, credit, anything. I laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound that echoed in the silent room. You think this is about money? You left me for dead on the side of a road. You erased me. This is about justice. I looked at Jessica, the daughter I had loved more than life itself. You had a choice. You could have been my partner. Instead, you chose to be a thief. Please, Dad, she started, tears streaming down her face. But they were tears of self-pity, not remorse. And now, I said, turning to the stunned engineers, you have a choice. You can go down with this sinking ship, or you can work for the company that actually holds the key to the future. On cue, Leo walked in, holding a stack of folders. Mr. Miller, the transition contracts are ready. He placed them on the table. The company logo at the top read, Phoenix Dynamics. Phoenix Dynamics? One of the engineers asked. The company that announced this morning it has developed a stable, next-generation battery, immune to the flaws plaguing the Aura core, I explained. My company. We're hiring. And we're acquiring all of Aura Power's assets for pennies on the dollar in the bankruptcy auction next month. The betrayal on their faces was absolute. I hadn't just destroyed them, I had replaced them. I had built their replacement right under their noses. They lost everything. The mansion, the cars, the friends, the reputation. They were publicly disgraced, criminally investigated for fraud, and buried under a mountain of debt they would never be able to repay. The last time I saw them, they were leaving a courthouse, swarmed by reporters. Jessica's face was blotchy and swollen from crying. Mark just looked hollowed out, a shell of the arrogant man he once was. Our eyes met across the crowd. In hers, I saw a flicker of the little girl I used to read bedtime stories to, and for a moment, my heart ached. But it was followed by the cold, hard memory of her voice in that hospital room. I turned and walked away. I had my company, my life's work, and a future I had built from the ashes of their betrayal. But I had lost my daughter. Justice, I learned, is a heavy thing. It can feel like victory, but it also leaves a scar. I poured my life into creating a source of endless energy, only to learn that the most powerful forces in the world, greed and love, can burn out just as easily, leaving nothing but darkness behind. And in that darkness, you have to find a way to build a new light for yourself. If you like this type of family revenge, subscribe us and share with your fam. Have a good night.